I have watched 14 Odyssey films, kinda. Some of them aren't exactly Odyssey films, but that'll make sense when we get there. I'm gonna review all 14 of them as fast as I can, which isn't really all that fast before we get into the Odysseys, the first and only and one-time award ceremony to recognize the best of the best in Odyssey cinema. Let's go.
Is some jerk making your life miserable?
Ulysses and the Giant Polyphemus. George Méliès directed this film and played both Odysseus and the Cyclops Polyphemus, which makes this what will probably be our most egotistical Odyssey adaptation on this list. I mean, this guy really thought he was fucking French Eddie Murphy. Anyways, Méliès combines the Calypso story with the Polyphemus story. Odysseus collapses and then some nymphs and Calypso resuscitate him. Then a hand extends from the cave, throwing up some gang signs for like 30 seconds, and then sticks his head out. Odysseus quickly grabs a spear and stabs him in the mechanically puppeteered third eye, upon which some weird milky white substance oozes from his eye. This took me out of the film more than any of the other 100-year-old effects, because what the hell is this shit coming from his eye? That's not blood, bro. Although, the gang signs from before made me think differently. The Return of Ulysses, 1908. I'm in film school, in case you couldn't tell by this stupid-ass video idea, and I've taken a few silent film classes so far, and while silent films don't do it for me as much, there's something so beautiful about how silent films arrange their sets. Even the opening frame is nice, like a Baroque painting with the whole court around its ruler. We then meet Telemachus, who's extremely young here. If Odysseus has been gone for 20 years, how does he have a son that's like 10, maybe? Penelope, is there something you need to tell us? After dreaming of Odysseus' return, Penelope's handmaiden tells her suitors she's been lying, and they lose their fucking minds. The props and costume design shine in this sequence as the suitors destroy the palace of Ithaca. It's simple, but it's effective stuff. In the ruins, the high priest tells Penelope, "Yo, tell them you'll marry whoever can string Odysseus' bow." And she's like, "Oh shit, idea, nobody can do that other than him." At the same time, Odysseus finally returns, encountering Eumaeus, who assures him of Penelope's fidelity, before he bends the bow, shoots Antinous, and kills the suitors. The final text tells us that Minerva encouraged the goddess Aurora not to rise the next morning, to allow Odysseus and Penelope a long night of reunion. Jesus, man, get your freaky ass on, bro. La Odysseia, 1911. Compared to our previous silent films, there are far more exteriors and semi-open sets that make the audience actually feel like they're in a different era. The coolest set in the entire film is the Phaeacian castle of Nausicaa's father. The film is heavily tinted. Tinting is when the black and white film was washed completely into color, so you didn't have accurate color capture on set, but rather bathed the entire scene in its tone. There was red for the sack of Troy and blue for the voyage upon the ocean. It can be kind of cool, but most of the time in this film, it's not symbolic coloring, but the actual color that would be dominant in that environment. So it's just kind of dumb in the end. To do the visual trick of Polyphemus, this film relies on double exposure, which honestly works quite well. However, the final fight works a lot less well. It's incredibly disappointing. There's no test of the axes, even though they fill the set design. The choreography is terrible, and Odysseus having a shield feels wrong. Part of what makes this fight so cool is that he's not really prepared to take on all the suitors. I don't know, that's just a personal opinion thing. Maybe Homer wrote that Odysseus grabs a shield. I wouldn't know. Alright, but that's enough silent films. Can we get some dialogue, please? Ulysses, 1954. The writing in Ulysses was so ass. Director Mario Camerini co-wrote with 7 different writers, and despite what they say about watched pots, this many cooks in the kitchen certainly led Ulysses to boil over. A tremendous financial success, Ulysses 1954 is an Italian-American co-production with actors speaking their own native language, as all dialogue would be dubbed over regardless. Composer Alessandro Ciccinini of Bicycle Thieves fame brings an instantaneously intense sound of the world. I mean, check this out. While our silent films combine Polyphemus and Circe's islands, Ulysses combines the women of Circe and Calypso. It seems like an interesting choice to have Silvana Mangano, the actress for Penelope, also play Circe, a plotline not in other retellings. While her green costume and hairpiece effortlessly captures Odysseus' men and the male audience, I find it a fruitless choice when all is said and done. It could potentially contrast the women, drawing out Odysseus' infidelity, but it more gives the vibe they wanted to see Mangano in more sensual scenes. While in previous adaptations, the physical contest for the suitors was only stringing Odysseus' bow, The arrow in the 12 axe handles makes its first appearance here. A viciously incredible slaying of the suitors makes up for how ridiculously dull the second act is. A beautiful closing text, which bears a poetry not found in any of the dialogue, reads, "The immortality that Ulysses refused of a goddess was later given to him by a poet, and the epic poem that Homer sang will live for all of time." Beautiful. Contempt, 1963. So this is the first of two films that aren't exactly Odyssey adaptations. Le Mépris is Godard's 1963 film about a French writer, his wife, the American producer, and the German Fritz Lang, developing a cinematic retelling of the Odyssey with a troubled writing process. The film is adapted from a 1954 Italian novel Il Disprezzo by Alberto Moravia, based on his experience on Ulysses. While Contempt isn't an adaptation of Homer's poem, it's certainly conversing with it. As Philip Lope writes for Criterion, Contempt is an ironic retelling of Homer's Odyssey. The troubled writer is Odysseus, and his beautiful wandering Brigitte Bardot is Penelope. But they're together. There is no Trojan War to separate them. Let me just say, Contempt is perhaps the most gorgeous film I've ever seen. It's not only because they're shooting in picturesque Mediterranean locations and textured French streets, but because Godard had simply mastered the art of blocking a scene and the power of color by 1963. Nostos the Return, 1989. I went into Nostos with pretty high expectations. I'd heard it described as an experimental poetic film with very minimal dialogue. And the dialogue that can be heard in the film is a fictional language created by the writer combining Latin, Greek, and Sanskrit. The attention to detail to create a fictional Mediterranean language made me optimistic, but the end result of Nostos Il Ritorno's complexity is a relatively meaningless film. Now, I don't want to be too cruel, because this is the first film that is not an attempt at a fun, swashbuckling blockbuster story to mint some money. Nostos had a very lengthy production experience for writer and director Franco Piovoli that culminated in a critically acclaimed film. It has a clever conceit of metaphorically exploring the nostalgia of the Odyssey through scenes that are symbolic of incidents and episodes we know from the poem. In fact, a lot of discussion around this film has been what each of these moments mean and which scenes they align from in Homer's original. To me, this is not that interesting a critical exercise because the way that these episodes are encrypted in this version don't illuminate something new about the original Homer or about Piovoli's message. They're more just cinematography drills. The film looks incredible, I won't deny that, but unlike Contempt, Nostos doesn't use its beautiful composition to say much of anything. Ulysses' Gaze, 1995. Theo Angelopoulos' direction does something that very few filmmakers have done in a compelling way: represent memory on screen. Through intricate blocking as a camera flies through a town square and Harvey Keitel's A weaves through dozens of extras, Angelopoulos captures decades without a single cut. It's no surprise that Angelopoulos said, quote, "In these shots of mine, time becomes space and space becomes time," in his interview with Gerald O'Grady. Ulysses' Gaze is the middle film in his trilogy of Borders, which began in 1991 with the suspended step of the stork. My bad. And concluded with Palme d'Or winner Eternity in a Day in 1998. The film tells the story of a filmmaker searching for lost film reels that could potentially be the first moving image ever captured in the Balkan region. In the mid-1990s, as you may know, the Balkans was a nationalistically divided war zone, and Angelopoulos chronicles the conflict through the tale of Odysseus, a man desperately searching for home, a kingdom in ruins. It's a great film, but it's so profoundly about cinema that I do think I'm partial to it for that reason. Films about film often perform very well at festivals like Cannes because that's why we're there, right? We all love this shit, like kind of obvious. Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, 2000. This is an excellent film that I think has really declined in its popularity over the years. It's not like irrelevant now, but this film had Clooney in his prime and won Album of the Year at the Grammys for its soundtrack. Not in the film soundtrack category, to be clear. It won the general album category, beating out India Ari's Acoustic Soul, Bob Dylan's 9/11 release Love and Theft, and no, this is not a joke, Outkast's Stankonia. To some degree, I think the Coens making better films and then subsequently breaking up definitely hindered this film's legacy. Nonetheless, Oh Brother is a super cool film that features some of the most interesting blend of Joel and Ethan Coen's sensibilities, which we can now delineate pretty clearly with their independent careers in the 2020s. Do not get me started on Honey Don't. Bro, Quote, the title of the film is taken from Preston Sturges' Sullivan's Travels, a movie within which a director named John Sullivan is attempting to make a truthful film account of contemporary social deprivation. Unlike some of the other films that we've discussed, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou does a great job of actually commenting on both the new setting that it's taking place in, as well as the original text. For example, Tiresias has been changed to a blind black railroad worker to illuminate the racism of the 1930s, while at the same time exploring how black music was made popular by Ulysses Everett, which is George Clooney's character. And the Cyclops' lair now becomes a meeting of the KKK. The SpongeBob SquarePants movie, 2004. I wasn't allowed to watch SpongeBob growing up. I'm not resentful of this fact. I think it made me more intelligent. But as I finally watched the full piece of SpongeBob art for the first time as a 21-year-old man, part of me was kind of sad that I missed out on this stuff. Just a small part of me, the stupid part of me. SpongeBob does a great job of playing with tropes, of making things work for kids, while still clearly being made by adults who have a love for a diverse body of film and television. The theme of the SpongeBob SquarePants movie is being a kid is okay and has value. While that's a very common kids movie moral, the film does it above average. All of the performances are hilarious, the script is very funny, and the animation is so expressive compared to kids' films today. I will say, however, that people have exaggerated how Odyssey-ish the SpongeBob SquarePants movie is. It's a good headline to be like, yo, this kids movie is actually an adaptation of a Greek epic poem for big boys. That sounds very compelling. But aside from a few villains, it's not actually there. SpongeBob isn't trying to get home. For most of the movie, he's on a quest. He's not trying to get to a wife or a son or his kingdom. He's trying to save Mr. Krabs. There are obviously similarities, but all of these sites and listicles on Odyssey adaptations should probably remove this one. As a guy who has now seen 14. Or 12, to be honest. 11 if we don't count this one. Fun movie, though. Just months before SpongeBob's feature debut premiered at the prestigious Chinese theater, Wolfgang Petersen's Troy premiered at some random Cinestar cinema in Berlin. And this movie, Troy, has lit the Twitter racists up these last few months. While it's an adaptation of the Iliad rather than the Odyssey, it's been touted as a superior adaptation. So rather than adding a film just because I'd already seen it and I like it, which is the case for Contempt, we're adding a film that I think is probably going to suck. Troy, 2004. Troy is mostly held back by a terrible script. There's a pretty all-star collection of early 2000s actors who have awful line delivery because of the dialogue's faux intelligence, attempting to give it a classical vibe. Worse yet, every American actor has a ridiculous accent that shifts from scene to scene and sometimes from line to line. I don't know what about a Greek epic makes you think you need to speak British. They're not related, buddy. And the dialogue is repetitive too. Nearly every scene must have a character repeat something like, this war will be remembered forever, or great warriors will always be remembered. It's so ham-fisted that you might as well put the film on 2X anytime two people start talking to each other. I think that's actually why it's called 2X. If I meet the film on its own terms, the best performances are from Brian Cox as Agamemnon and Eric Bana as Hector. Hector's death, spoiler alert. I mean, it's a fucking 3,000-year-old thing. I feel like it's not really spoiler, but Hector's death is fire. A touch of what the film could have been. Sean Bean as Odysseus, which we should note because this is an Odyssey video, is great, but definitely not Odysseus. He's not the remorseful man that we get from some of our later adaptations, and he's not the trickster that we get at the beginning. He's kind of just an honorable warrior figure. Visually, the film is a little better, but there are sporadic zooms, exemplifying how the visual language is arbitrary. Now, what I'd say this film is most known for today is that it made Achilles and Patroclus related, removing any sense of homosexuality from the story. Now, I did some research. Obviously, if you get rid of the gay people in a story, the wigs are going to look real bad, bro. Y'all see this shit? I'm realizing I think the Iliad is a far more interesting story than the Odyssey for a modern audience, and it's a lot easier to adapt into a feature film. The question is, what new ideas do you bring to the story in order to make it worth retelling? Achilles actually seems to be far more the killing machine who ought to be remorseful of his war crimes than Odysseus. In the actual Iliad, the war has just been going on for so long that it seems like it's the way life should be, and it's only in the middle of the story that we flash back to find out that Helen's kidnapping was the catalyst. Especially if this was for a Greek audience looking back at the Mycenaean age and, having these wonderful dreams of the glory of its warfare, it's powerful to know it was ultimately meaningless. All of these city-states fell by their time. The Greek Dark Ages destroyed everything. The futile battle of the Iliad is a great anti-war message. And instead, Wolfgang Petersen says over and over again, Achilles will be remembered forever for her glory. But I think the more obvious lesson is, Achilles died, thousands died, and for what? The Telemachy, 2012. The Telemachy is not the Telemachy. Yes, it's called that. Yes, the main character's name is Telemachus and his father's name is Ilias, but there is absolutely nothing about this story that tries to interact with the Homeric text or retell really any large element of the story. Most notably, Telemachus does not leave home and talk to Menelaus or Mentor or Nestor to learn more, and then Odysseus comes home. Instead, he just finds Odysseus on an island in the Greek Ocean, upon which Telemachus begins to flirt with another woman on the island, before then discovering she's his half-sister that his dad hid from him. Who the fuck is writing this shit, bro? It's Odysseus, not Oedipus. Did we mix those up? The worst aspect of the film, though, is the prominent B-plot that I would guess takes up about 30% of the runtime. It's the story of another random British kid. By the way, Telemachus is like Greek and British. And this random brown British kid wants to date a white girl. The only way that these two storylines intersect is that Telemachus actually sees the final conversation between the brown girl and his little white friend go down on a park bench as he waits for his father. Then, after this irrelevant B-plot that we could not care less about finally concludes, Ilias returns to speak to Telemachus, and then we just cut to black. What? Why is half of this damn movie about some random guy? Now, it's not shot horribly, and there's some very cool locations they go to, but all in all, the Telemachy is terrible. Ulysses: A Dark Odyssey, 2018. I genuinely don't know what to say about Ulysses: A Dark Odyssey because there is nothing there. It's a low-budget action film somewhat fashioned on the concept of a man returning to his wife with a threatening villain named Mr. Ocean, presumably named so because he fulfills Poseidon's role in the actual Odyssey, not because he has anything to do with Frank Ocean or Danny Ocean. The film is set in a sci-fi fictional future of 2023. It's just a brief 5-year time jump for this drastically different future in which Europe has turned into the United States of Europe, and there's like tyranny or something. I don't know a lot about Brexit politics, but maybe this had something to do with what would happen if Britain didn't exit the EU. Who knows? The film's absolute irrelevancy, however, is only saved by the fact that Danny Glover plays Poseidon, Mr. Ocean himself, and has an extended cameo which they used to sell this film to poor schmucks scrolling through Tubi who remember Danny Glover from back in the day. Unlike the Telemachy, which has some very nice shots, I'll admit, Ulysses: A Dark Odyssey is a very, very ugly movie on a writing level and on a visual level that basically makes it irredeemable. Sorry, that's kind of it. Everything is bad in this movie. I can't even think of jokes for it. The Return, 2024. I feel The Return is the perfect Odyssey adaptation. And it's not the perfect movie at all. In fact, when all is said and done, it's like a 6 out of 10. But it's the perfect adaptation of this story for the modern age. Much like some of the other films we've discussed, The Return removes all the gods and divine elements from the story. In fact, even something that isn't that fantastical, which is Calypso and her drug-like lotus, is brushed off as potentially just an affair. And in an era where we are interested in adaptations by creators like our next one, Christopher Nolan, this film works very well. Funnily enough, unlike Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, The Return is kind of like The Dark Knight for Greek mythology. The film stars Ralph Fiennes and Juliette Binoche collaborating as the lead couple for the third time in their careers, following Wuthering Heights in 1992 and 9-time Oscar winner The English Patient in 1996. Their history as an on-screen pair bestows an extra layer on their love. Their performances, and everyone's performances besides Telemachus, are so great. The script certainly has some weak moments, but the blocking and lighting help save those sequences. At this point, the slaying of the suitors has become my barometer for how good an Odyssey movie is, and this one is pretty fucking great. The Odyssey, 2026. I'm a bit of a contrarian on Christopher Nolan, so I didn't go into The Odyssey with the hopes of it being my favorite movie ever, and it was not my favorite movie ever, but I think it might be my favorite Nolan film. Maybe. I want to begin with, like so much of the discussion around Oppenheimer, these damn performances. Benny Safdie, who appears in this film as the auriful Agamemnon, never even shows his face. My favorite performances were probably Lupita Nyong'o as Helen of Troy and Clytemnestra, Robert Pattinson as Antinous, and Himesh Patel as Eurylochus, my brown brother. He's killing it. During the Telemachy portion of this film, Tom Holland also really impressed me. On the other hand, I was stunned by how little I liked Anne Hathaway's performance. And I know it is just the most overdone complaint about Nolan to say that he cannot write women, but just because it's been said 12,000 times does not mean it's not true. Penelope's dialogue was so uniquely buns that it stunted her performance. So yeah, Nolan's writing is often the weakest part of his films, but his strengths are the big picture, tortured arc of a character. So does it work big picture? The asterisk with this film is that there is a 3-minute cap on the IMAX camera, and that makes every scene a lot worse. The blocking is so limited, we're forced to enter an over-the-shoulder shot, reverse shot almost immediately, and that conversation only lasts 3 to 5 pages because that's all he could really capture. So, let's begin. For Best Actor, we have Kirk Douglas as Ulysses, Ralph Fiennes as Odysseus, George Clooney as Ulysses Everett, Matt Damon as Odysseus, and Harvey Keitel as A. If I knew enough about the Odyssey, if I could really speak authoritatively on how Odysseus is supposed to be characterized, I think I could say with some confidence that Kirk Douglas is the most accurate adaptation on this list, and then George Clooney's Ulysses Everett would come right behind. Doesn't really have the royal element to it because he's not a king, he's kind of a nobody, no pun intended. They both have that trickster persona to them. However, I don't actually know anything, so I'm just going off the pure value of the performance, just like raw, just incredible skill level. And for that, it is abundantly clear that Ralph Fiennes' Odysseus is the best actor. Ralph Fiennes does what Matt Damon was trying to do and did quite well, but just a hair better, maybe more than a hair, just executed better. For Best Actress, the nominees are Silvana Mangano as Cersei and Penelope. Remember, it's a double role. Juliette Binoche as Penelope, Anne Hathaway as Penelope, Holly Hunter as Penny, and Scarlett Johansson as Princess Mindy. Now, to be fair, Princess Mindy should technically not be in this category. Technically should be Best Supporting Actress, but there's just not any other girls in the SpongeBob SquarePants movie. She's the most important female character without a doubt, so I'm going to put her in the Best Actress list, also because the Best Supporting is a little bit crowded. Silvana Mangano doing a double role does really demonstrate a lot of her skill level. I think she shows off as an actress. In a different world, I think she could win this category with a slightly different script for Ulysses, but she just didn't really get the material necessary. Would it be crazy to give both of the Best Lead Performance awards to The Return? No, it would not be crazy. That's exactly what I'm going to do. I featured clips from a scene, which is also in Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, in which Penelope and Odysseus speak to each other the night before the test of the suitors, and she begins to suspect that perhaps this is her husband and he is no beggar. It's a really great scene just on a pure dramatic irony level. Shout out Homer for that one. In that scene, Juliette Binoche just acts her ass off. The dialogue can be a little clunky in The Return. It's not perfect, but I think she really just kills it with what she gets. For Best Supporting, we have both actors and actresses. Konstantin Markoulikas as Ilias, that's from the Telemachy. Maya Morgenstern as characters inspired by Penelope, Calypso, Cersei, and Nausicaa, quadruple role. Brian Cox as Agamemnon in Troy. Zendaya as Athena. And Robert Pattinson as Antinous in Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. In order to see Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey in 70mm IMAX in the Chinese theater, I had to watch it in the middle of my pre-production for this video. For a long time, I thought that Robert Pattinson's Antinous would win because it's just such a cool performance. Robert Pattinson just always brings a unique perspective to all of his roles. However, Brian Cox as Agamemnon is just such a vibrant, energetic villain performance, and by far the best part of that film. Just absolutely livens up that shit. I want to recognize Brian Cox's Agamemnon. He's doing something he always does, evil dad, evil grandpa. He's doing Succession. He's doing every role he's ever had, but doing it well, as ever. For Best Director, the nominees are Christopher Nolan, Umberto Pasolini, Joel Cohen and Ethan Cohen, Theodoros Angelopoulos, and Mario Camerini. Now, based on how I've spoken throughout this video, I think you can guess where I'm going. I never want to minimize other people's accomplishments, but you can tell when a director just has his hand gripping the entire production, bleeds into every element of it, just how well controlled it is, how long certain shots last, how perfect the blocking is. This is clearly a director just working in his A game. Now, based on how I've spoken throughout this video, I think you can guess where I'm going, because only one of these films is as good as it is specifically because of its direction, because of its vision, and that is Theodoros Angelopoulos in Ulysses Gaze. The nominees for Best Screenplay are Christopher Nolan for The Odyssey, Umberto Pasolini, Edward Bond and John Cawley for The Return, Joel Cohen and Ethan Cohen for Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, Theo Angelopoulos et al. For Ulysses Gaze, because it's like 5 writers or something like that, and then Steven Hillenburg for writing the SpongeBob SquarePants movie. For this one, we gotta go with the Coen brothers. This is such a unique script, and the only one of all of these scripts that actually actively adapts and comments on both the original text and the new era in which it takes place in. The nominees for Best Cinematography include Hoyt van Hoytema for The Odyssey, Marius Pandaru for The Return, Roger Deakins for Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, Georgios Arvanitis and Andreas Sinanos for Ulysses Gaze, and Gabriel Lucaris for The Telemachy. Now that last one is a notch worse than the rest, but they're clearly working with a very low budget, and I wanted to acknowledge that this guy did a lot with very little. Now when I looked for his picture to make the graphic for this section, I discovered that he hasn't really done anything since then. He's had a corporate career. I got his picture off of his LinkedIn, but I do really admire what he's able to do with very little. So shout out to bro, I had to nominate him here. I think the best on this list is Roger Deakins for Oh Brother, Where Art Thou. That film has a very particular look, lit very particularly, has a very particular color palette, and those kinds of things are the kinds of things that you can only get from a man as experienced as Roger Deakins, with as much time behind the camera as him. The composers nominated for Best Score are Ludwig Göransson for The Odyssey, Rachel Portman and Goffredo Ghibellini for The Return, T-Bone Burnett for Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, James Horner for Troy, and Alessandro Ciccinini for Ulysses. This is my most personal bias one. It's going to be Alessandro Ciccinini for Ulysses. I love these 50s, 60s Italian scores. The world is kind of coming around and revisiting these. Henry Mancini's work has gotten a lot of good critical reappraisal. Some of his stuff has been sampled in more recent songs, and I hope that all of these kinds of scores that are so epic and grandiose get their time in the limelight. This one is not like the best of his era or anything like that. I just love this style, and so it's going to beat out these other ones. And finally, for Best Picture, every single one of these 14 films could have won. I'm not going to give a nominees list. And I've also made it pretty clear which one of these I like and which one of these I don't like. And the winner is, no surprise here, Contempt. The one that is not really a traditional Odyssey adaptation. The one I included because I love it so much. It's just the best shit. I hope you all are not disappointed with that, with the fact that I just made that call there. Thank you all for watching. This one was supposed to be done a long time ago. I just ran into some stuff. Life got a little busy, and I wasn't able to do it how I wanted, but I still wanted to get it out. I still wanted to get it done because I fucking watched a lot of movies to make this video happen. If you're interested, you can check out that other video I made about the Odyssey that I alluded to earlier in this video, and stay tuned. New stuff coming. I'm going to be a little bit more committed in the next few months, years. No.